thank you to everyone joining us today from across the country and the world. I'm Alexander McCobin, the CEO here at Conscious Capitalism, Inc., and just so appreciate you taking the time to learn and grow in community with us today. Today, we're joined by Tracy Massey and Nikki Bush to explore how business can find its North Star in a complex world. As many of you know, conscious capitalism is a philosophy that emphasizes the human nature of capitalism in business. It's a movement of business leaders around the world working to improve both the practice and perception of capitalism to elevate humanity. And Conscious Capitalism, Inc. is a nonprofit organization dedicated to catalyzing that movement. Every week, we offer virtual gatherings as a way for the community to see how this philosophy takes shape in the leadership journeys and best practices of those in our network. Now, today's gathering will run for about 45 minutes. Tracy and Nikki will be in conversation for the first 30 of those, and then we're going to transition to audience questions from you during the last 10 to 15 minutes. So if at any point you have any questions, please type them into the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen, and we're going to get to as many as we can. And if you have any technical questions or issues, please email us at info@consciouscapitalism.org so we can help resolve them. Now, it's my pleasure to introduce today's speakers. Tracy Massey is the global president of Mars Pet Nutrition, responsible for the division of the business that represents over 50 household pet care brands. With over 17,000 associates around the world, Tracy oversees the strategy for growing the multi-billion-dollar pet nutrition portfolio in over 55 markets. With over 30 years of experience in Mars, Tracy previously served as president of the Mars Wrigley for the Americas, where she focused on delivering exceptional customer service, consumer insights, and innovation across the company's portfolio of confectionery brands. Here, she introduced M&M's Caramel to the US market, the biggest innovation in the brand's history. And Nikki Bush is the vice president for Mars Inc. She leads a cohesive enterprise future of work program for the Mars business with 130,000 associates working across a diverse portfolio of products and services in over 85 countries around the world. She's responsible for examining what needs to change in how, when, and where we work together, from the future role of offices to associate behaviors to guide us to the future. In her current role, she's embedding the learnings of remote working through the pandemic to create a set of flexible working practices that will step change the associate experience and business results for years to come. She also drives an inclusion and diversity intervention with over supply chain and partnerships with the global supply and global inclusion and diversity teams to step change the number of diverse leaders in their global supply teams. I'm so looking forward to this conversation. I just want to say, Tracy and Nikki, thank you so much for joining us today. Let's get off to the races.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So it's great to see everyone today. And Tracy, it's great to see you. I was working out when we first met, which I think is in 2001. So that would be 20 years ago. But I have to say, this is the first time we've ever done an interview together, certainly a virtual interview. But I'm really very much looking forward to it. What about you?
Yeah, it's true, and it's a bit strange talking to someone who I consider not just a colleague but a friend over video with lots of other people watching. But it's really good to be able to do this with Conscious Capitalism. I was lucky enough a few years ago to go to the Conscious Capitalism CEO conference, and I have to say it was the best conference I've ever been to. Never have I before been to a conference and stayed and listened to every single speaker, because it's just inspiring to see purpose-led businesses. You know, Conscious Capitalism talks a lot about charity doesn't work. So business needs to step up and business needs to do the right thing. And actually doing the right thing is good for business and it's good for the world. So really, really excited to be here today and really grateful to Alexander and team for enabling me to be part of this movement because it is really, really impressive.
Thank you. I think it sounds really intriguing, and as I reflect on being in Mars, I feel really lucky that we've both been in Mars for a long time. I think I love the kind of the mission of conscious capitalism around purpose driven, And I think about Mars being a very much a purpose-driven organization that really is a destination for leaders who are looking for that. And so what people, certainly you and I come from the UK, you can tell that in both of our accents, which despite being in the US for many years, we haven't lost. When we talk about Mars, though, if you're in the UK and you talk about Mars, people think about the Mars bar, which is something that, for those that have spent time in the UK, is kind of an iconic brand. But if you talk about Mars in the US, sometimes you get a bit of people don't really understand, and that's because we often talk through our brands. So Pedigree, Whiskers, Sheba, Caesar, M&M's, Extra, Orbit, Ben's Original. So you can sort of see that we talk through our brands, and we have a lot of brands that people might not know we have. So I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, it's interesting. Mars is a privately held company, been around for over 100 years. And to your point, we've previously talked through our brands, but we've come to the recognition of that's not enough anymore. It's not what consumers expect. Consumers expect companies to step up and do the right thing. And now we need to come to the marketplace with our own voice, which we've been doing for the last few years. I'm pretty proud of working for a company like Mars, that we've always done the right thing and just never talked about it and talked through our brands. And it's, it's not surprising when it's your own company. Do you really want to have your name out there? But the recognition now is that's not okay. As a company now, we need to step up. We need to say what's right and what's wrong, and we need to be more open about our purpose. We've always been purpose driven, but we're talking about it a lot more now, which I think, for a large company, it is absolutely expected.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think, so I think in the introduction, you've had a very varied career, and I certainly, I think Alexander shared that. I think what I'd also like to share is I have too, and what's been amazing is it spans areas of the business, it spans functions as well. So when I first joined the business, I was in sales and marketing for the first, and we both joined actually on the graduate training program that Mars offers. And I've spent time as the head of supply for Global Chocolate, which was like the 30 factories around the world. There, R&D. I was fortunate enough to run one of our businesses, which is really around health supplements and some of the great work we've done around science. And as Alexander said, what I love about working for Mars is I've now been given a very different challenge, which is how do we think about what we've learned through the last 16 months in some of the disruptions around the workplace, and what do we want to take forward that makes us a more resilient and a business that all people of all life stages and all diversities want to work for. And so that's certainly a huge challenge, and it's a huge challenge for everybody out there at the moment, thinking about what are they learning that they want to take forward, and every business I think is discussing that. But I certainly feel very privileged that I don't have a big background in HR, but I do have a background in really understanding Mars and Mars culture. So very privileged to do that. So when I talk to people outside of Mars, one of the questions I often get, whether it's being, if you're out, I'm thinking about pre-COVID times when you might have been out at a dinner party, you meet someone on a plane, they're always, okay, well, you're kind of unique, you're a bit different, what makes you tick? How do you answer that question when you've got someone, asking you that when you're traveling?
Well, the first question is who is Mars? So I normally, when people say, who do you work for? I normally say M&M's because everybody recognizes M&M's. So I think, and that does say a lot about the fact that we've still got an awful lot of work to do as a corporation to help people understand who we are. I think we're doing a better job. We've got a lot more to do. But I think what's unique about us is, we have been around for 100 years. We're privately held, a family business with a massive global footprint. So an ability to do the right thing because of our footprint, because of our size, because of our global nature, and really influence things. But the thing that really sets us apart is the fact that because we're private, we don't have to go quarter to quarter. We can do things for the long term. So you'll see us invest significantly in things like sustainability. You'll see us invest behind our purpose. Our purpose isn't just words on a page, it's real. The family that owns the company wants to make a big difference. And we have the the ability to do that, the freedom to do that, because we're not going quarter to quarter. We haven't got to answer to banks, answer to shareholders, answer to stakeholders. So we're able to do, as a big company, what many of the conscious capitalism smaller companies do, which is make sure that you do the right thing, that you sustain your business for the long term, because we've got to make money. You know, you have to be able to make money to stay in business, but the responsibility that then comes with that as a business is to do the right thing, because we believe that if you don't do the right thing, you won't be in business. Well, we won't be in business for the next 100 years. And I think that's what sets us apart, is we have the ability to do that and do it in the right way. And for sure, that's the reason I've worked for Mars for 30 years, because it's very important to me to do the right thing as well as to do well in business. And that's why I think Mars and Capital Consciousness really, really drive, because the philosophy is very, very similar.
Yeah, it feels like it. And I think I'm 1 year behind you. I think I'm at 29. So, so two things about if you look at who we are, then yes, we're from the UK. But the other thing is we're senior leaders, women leaders in Mars. And so, you know, what's your reflection on what kind of obligation we have as senior female leaders to speak up?
Yeah, I mean, I think the obligation is on all leaders, not just female leaders. You know, our job is to speak up and make sure the right thing gets done. But I think it's even more necessary for female leaders to speak up, because quite often what you'll hear is people need to see people like them at the top to be able to think that they can get there. So they say you need to see it to be it. That's the standard quote that you hear. And so it's really even more important, if you are a diverse leader, whether it be female or racial or, you know, sexual orientation, whatever it is, the more diverse you are, the more important it is to speak up, so that people like you can see that it's possible to make it to these positions, that it can be done, and to know that it's okay, and that the company you work for values diversity. You know, I'm really proud of our diversity. It's in terms of our representation, you know, 45% of our management population are female, 100% of our leadership teams are more than 80% local market. And if you think of the, you know, markets across the world we're in, that's pretty impressive. But it really needs the culture to be right for that to continue. So even if you've got great numbers now, it doesn't mean to say you'll have great numbers in the future, because the trick is to make sure the talent pipeline has those diversity numbers. Otherwise, those people won't make it through. And if they don't hear and see their senior leaders talking about the issues, talking about the things that are on their minds, you know, really understanding what's on their minds and talking about it and being open about it, they won't stay in the business, and then we won't continue to have diversity in the future. And I truly believe better business is a diverse business. The more diversity you have, the more diversity of thought, the more diversity just in general, you will make better decisions, you will have a better business, you will be more agile, you will be more empathetic. You know, all of the things that make good business, honestly, the more diverse your business is, it's good for business. It's a bit like we say, you know, driving purpose is good for business. Diversity is good for business. It really is that simple. It's a shame it's taken us so long to work it out, I think.
Yeah, and I suppose what I would add to that, with my sort of second hat in the role that I'm doing right now, is really looking at inclusion and diversity in our supply and our STEM areas, where you know, traditionally it's been much harder, particularly if you take about factories and in supply, to have a high percentage of female women and leaders. And I've done some listening sessions with the top 50 women in supply across the world. And what you were saying before, which is you've got to see people who you can relate to say, all right, yeah, it's possible. You also want to see your range, because, you know, the way you might go about it may not be the way that, you know, and you also want to see people who are close to your level. I think one of the things I always say to people when I'm talking about diversity and inclusion is we always have this vision that the person above us has really got it all sorted. So when if I'm at this level, I'm a general manager. When I'm a regional president, I'm really going to have it, you know, I'm really going to have it together. And then when I'm a regional when I'm a global president, and that's really not true. And I think that's and so the ability to bring your whole self to work and make sure that you know, you can bring your vulnerabilities, and that's a strength, I think is really important. And I completely agree with what you said around diversity. And it's also around inclusion. So if you can get the numbers, but if you're not valuing those different views and people feel included, then you won't continue, won't sustain it. So but we've been, obviously we've already said we've been in business a long time. How do you think it's changed for the expectations for female leaders today versus where it was, say, 15, 20 years ago?
I think it's changed a lot. When I first, entered the workforce, I did chemical engineering. I had a STEM background, and there were 70 people in my class at university and 3 women. And when I joined in manufacturing, there were hardly any women. I think I spent the first 15 years of my career trying to prove that I was just as good as the guys, and I wasn't any different. And I think what's really changed now is differences are valued. You don't have to try and be the same as everybody else. Actually, differences are valued, and I think there's more of a default recognition that women are expected to be leaders. It's very different. In the past, it was like, well, you're one in a room of maybe even 25. Now that's not an expectation. It's very, very different. So it certainly is easier, I think, for women to come up through the organization. And I think people have seen the benefit of an inclusive and diverse workforce. They're more inclusive workforce, are more flexible, they're more agile, they're more empathetic. It's just very different. And I think businesses recognize that. So we're not where we need to be. But I think there's a big difference in where we were, and a big difference in the recognition that where things have to go. But and one of the things with what you're doing in terms of future of work, Nikki, I mean, we've talked a lot about, and lots of businesses talk a lot about what's happened in the past year, 18 months with COVID, and how work needs to change. Maybe you can share with us some of the future of work things that you're seeing, and maybe give some advice about how businesses need to be different going into this new way of working.
Yeah, I think certainly what the last 16 months has taught all businesses is that we busted a lot of myths, right? So if you were someone that believed you could never close the books virtually, if you could never have a board meeting virtually, then there's been a lot of myths busted. I think what it's done also is accelerated some trends that were already happening. And it's also shown that you really need to listen to your associate population in different life stages. So what you may have is very different preferences around how work gets done, when work gets done, where work gets done, depending on who you talk to. And so it's not a one size fits all. But I do think some of the myths we've busted, and what we hear from many associates, is the ability to be productive in work and life and integrate that better is a huge opportunity. And therefore, you hear a lot of businesses talking about hybrid working and having a balance of in office that would be there for collaboration, kind of connection, but really getting some good deep focus work done at home, and maybe some more routine meetings as well via Zoom or via Microsoft Teams. And I do think it's a great opportunity, and many people have said it's a great opportunity for us to kind of accelerate forward to make sure we give options for more diverse working styles. What we have to make sure of, though, is that we don't, you can see through many of the reports. I know McKinsey and Lean In did a great report on women in the workplace in 2020 that showed that although there was obviously a lot more work needed to be done. They called it the double shift. So many women were doing their work, doing house chores, but then also doing homeschooling, and that's a huge amount. And although in many men were also taking on more, there was a discrepancy. And so what we need to make sure as we go forward is that we provide the right environment so that people can integrate work and life in a much better way, but we also support different groups so that they have the ability not to get burnt out, or I think mental fatigue has become a big topic over the last few months, to make sure we support people in that. And I'd say I'm very proud that Mars has really leaned into some really strong mental health support systems. So, but it's a complex situation. There's no one size fits all, but it is a huge opportunity for us to contemporize, all businesses to contemporize how they work in the future. Anyway, I'm going to talk a little bit more about purpose. So I got distracted there with my future work, which I spend a lot of time thinking about. So behind you there, you have A Better World for Pets, which is the Mars Pet Care purpose. How does that guide your decision making?
Yeah, I mean, I think, one of the things we're really lucky to work for a private company like Mars is we do have the freedom to really, live our purpose and make good impact on society. In fact, it's not just it's an expectation. And in terms of our purpose, A Better World for Pets, we believe that pets make a better world for humans. You hear lots of stories about how pets help with loneliness, how they help with mental anxiety. There's tons and tons of research that pets really do make a better world for humans in terms of stress relief. It doesn't matter what you do, they always love you. They always greet you with a smile, which, I wish my children did that. No, it doesn't always happen. So because we believe pets make a better world for humans, we believe we want to make a better world for pets. But at the same time, business isn't a charity. We have to be able to do good business and live our purpose. And we believe actually both work. And I think that's a secret sauce at Mars, quite honestly. You really can't run a successful business without a purpose. Some of the things that we do to live that is, because we believe pets make a better world for humans, we want more people to have pets and experience the joy that comes with having a pet. And some of the barriers to having a pet is it's expensive and I can't afford it. Or what do I do with my pet when I go to work or when I travel? So some of the activities that we do to try and move that forward is at something called a Better Cities for Pets, where we try and get more cities, and it's a program that started in the US, is rolling out across the world, where we encourage cities to make their cities pet friendly, encourage hotels to make their hotels pet friendly, restaurants, and particularly workplaces, because we have a lot of evidence that says if you can take your pet to work with you, it actually helps you be more productive, be less stressed. Also, so there's some programs like that, Better Cities for Pets. Probably our biggest endeavor, which is pretty ambitious and is going to take us a while, is ending pet homelessness. How do we make sure that there aren't pets on the street, that there aren't pets in shelters being put down? Because that for us is the biggest goal that we have. If we could end pet homelessness, we would say we've really done our jobs. I mean, it's a long-term endeavor. It's very different in different parts of the world, but for sure, those are the two biggest things that we're working on to live our purpose.
Yeah, and so you talked a little bit about people owning pets. I hear anecdotally through the pandemic that there been more pet ownership. Are you worried there's going to be more people then not having pets when they go back to? I mean, what's your view around what's happened with pet ownership?
Yeah, pet ownership has gone through the roof during COVID, and in fact, it was pretty hard to adopt a pet. The shelters were emptied, literally emptied.
Is that just a US thing, or is that broader?
No, it's across the world. I mean, the US has more shelters, it's more established, shelter system. But across the world, pet ownership went up as people spent more time at home and were able to have a pet, which goes to the, if it was easier to have a pet, more people would do it.
Right.
Now, the good news is it's been long enough that our hope is, people have got attached to those pets and they won't give them back. But there is a risk that when you go back to work, you can't manage to keep your pet anymore and you have to give it back. That obviously is something we're working to try and prevent. But when you talk about your future of work, we also believe that people won't go back to work in the same way they did before.
Correct.
So there may be a better balance so that people can be able to keep their pets. But I think what's happened is pet ownership's gone up. People have realized what a benefit pets are in their lives. And, we expect that to continue. And, honestly, the benefit is for everyone. So, but we'll be working on programs to make sure if shelters do start to fill up again, that we find a way to pull them out. And it's different across the world. In India, it's, pets are largely strays on the street and there isn't a shelter program. That's one extreme. In the US, You've got an amazing shelter program. We're trying to move that towards how do you get pets out of shelters and move them to be more fostering. So if you think about children and the way, you used to have orphanages and now you have foster care, if you could move pets in the same way from shelters to foster care, then you move it on. So the world's very different and everybody's at different stages. The US is way in front in terms of the way it takes care of pets. But if we can continue to progress that and make a difference across the world, that's what we're trying to do.
So you mentioned bringing pets to work. Have you got any kind of tips for people that might be listening that are saying, oh, how would I have a pet friendly office? How would I go about suddenly, thinking about bringing pets to work?
Yeah, contact us.
Okay.
We have an amazing program that that can help companies do it. You have to have rules. You have to make sure, we have different color leashes for the level of training that a pet has.
Oh, wow, I didn't know that. Okay.
Well, if a pet's very well trained and very friendly, because everybody's going to come up and say hi to your pet, right? So
right.
If your pet's very well trained and very friendly, you have a certain leash that says, hey, feel free, come say hi to my pet. If your pet's a little bit more skittish, a little bit more nervous, and doesn't particularly like other people as much as their owner, have a different color leash which says, hey, leave my pet alone. This is my pet. Don't come near it, So I know that sounds silly, but there are many.
No, it sounds very practical, actually. I have two Labradors, and one of my Labradors loves meeting others, and the other one's really skittish. So I'd have two different types of leads, I think.
So there are many different things that you need to do to make people that also maybe don't like pets so much feel safe as well.
Right.
But overwhelmingly, there's a massive, massive benefit. But we have the programs. We know what to do. We advise companies of it. So I would just say anybody who's interested, please contact us and we will help you put a program in place.
Fantastic.
Good for business to have pets around.
Yeah, absolutely. It's actually, I obviously in our offices we have pets, and we do in the office I go to. It just lightens your mood. It's just, it's a very different feeling. So I have one final question, and it's around, for me, I think about, you got to deliver short-term business results. How do you deliver short-term business results and think about long-term purpose like sustainability work at the same time? Surely it's an either or it's you do one, then you do the, how do you think about that?
I don't think it is anymore. I think consumers are demanding that companies be more responsible and take care of the environment. It's becoming an expectation now. I also think that honestly, our job is to convince governments to do more as well. The role of business has increased significantly over the years, but people used to assume government would do everything. Now what consumers are expecting is for business to do more, because there's a lot of mistrust of government and more trust in companies. And I think you've seen, companies step up over the years, but it's becoming more of an expectation. Certainly that's the way we think about it. But if I look at most companies, they're all the bigger companies are doing the same thing, and smaller companies they just don't have the same platform. So the big difference about what we can do is because we have global brands, we have a platform. So how do you use the strength of your brand, because people will listen to you because you have a brand, to drive change? So I'll give you one of the things I'm most proud of. Our Shiba brand, which is a cat brand, and we've just recently, well, it's not recently actually, we've been doing the program for 11 years, restoring coral reefs, because our products use fish. We have committed to 100% sustainably fish. We're actually about 81% right now. We're working on the last 19. It's not easy, but it's important. So we're working on fish sustainability, but how do we make it a really, not just for the next 10 years, but for the next 30 years? And the way to do that is to restore coral reefs, because coral reefs are what enables they're basically the ecosystem of the ocean, right? So while we've been rebuilding coral reefs for 10, 11 years, we haven't been talking about it. So what we've recently done, and actually started 2 years ago, was building a reef off of the coast of Indonesia called Hope Reef, where we planted new coral reef growing. The local community did it. They do all the work. So we work with the local community and built a new reef. It's been growing. And over 2 years, we have now really massively increased the amount of coral that's there. The fish life has come back. Fish are back. Turtles are back. There's like a 60% increase in the amount of fish wildlife there. And we've just now launched that to drive awareness using our Shiba brand. So it was a bit like I was saying, Mars is quiet doing the right thing. We were quiet doing the right thing. We couldn't make enough of an impact. Using our Shiba brand, which is a global brand, we've now got a program that's on YouTube that if anybody watches the video, money goes straight to coral reef restoration. It's raised the awareness, and it raises the awareness to a problem that is massive that we can't solve on our own. So we can either do something little, or we can use our global brand to raise awareness and encourage others to lean in and do the same thing. So that, for me, it's business has a responsibility. We could talk about energy, we could talk about landfill, we could talk about, we have programs and commitments in all of those areas. But I think the real trick is if you have global brands or you have big brands, use them for good. because people will listen more, and you'll just get more impact.
Yeah, and I really like the coral reef example, because it's not something that, when I was in supply, I was very much focused on carbon footprint emissions, obviously getting to zero waste to landfill, looking to a place where we were getting renewable energy for our factories, which we've done an incredible job of. But it was really powerful to watch the coral reef videos and realize just how important that is. So I'm thinking we've kind of covered a wide range of topics. I'm wondering if we should pass back over to Alexander and find out what other questions that we have from the audience listening.
First off, thank you so much for this great conversation. And while I let some more questions come in, I want to take MC's prerogative and ask the first question myself, actually, because you both touched on how you've had different roles in Mars over the years. And so you've adopted different purposes over time. And I'm curious if you can share what that's been like, how you've maintained your own North Star, your purpose in business, and worked with the purposes of the different divisions of Mars as you've taken them on over your careers.
Can I go first?
Yeah, you want me to go first? You go first.
Go no, you do it.
All right, so I think one of the things I feel very fortunate about is, so within Mars we have, we do all our work, all our how is through the 5 principles. So we have 5 principles which have been they are talked about on and not just on a website, they are lived in. And so equality, responsibility, mutuality, efficiency, and freedom. And what I've certainly found is, as I've gone from role to role, and funnily, kind of Tracy started in manufacturing, I started in sales and marketing, and we kind of she went to finance to some stage. So we both did. But what I found is, whatever I've been working on, and I've been very fortunate that my personal ethics and values very much match the business ethics and values. And the two that really for me, really stand out are mutuality. So, a shared benefit will endure. So it's a mutual benefit is going to endure. So it's a win-win. And so for me, as I think about some of the challenges I faced, and the other one for me that I really like the responsibility principle, which is we have the ability to take on responsibility. We're not asked to take on responsibility. You take on responsibility. You are an associate and you look for opportunities, and that's expected. As you take on roles, what I love about Mars is you can definitely scope the role broader than the original, as long as it fits with the overall purpose of the business that you're working on. So that would be my reflection. I don't know what Tracy's would be.
Yeah, I mean, clearly it's one of the reasons I've stayed is the 5 principles and the way Mars does business. It's a very, ethical company that I relate to. And we always use them as a guide when we're making decisions. Does this fit the principles? But that said, businesses are very different. So you have to find the purpose in the business you're in, and it has to be real, because associates see through anything that's not real. Consumers see through anything that's not real. But, if I think about our food business, their purpose is about, that what they're linking to is the fact that, people have stopped talking to each other at the dinner table. Everybody's on their phones, people aren't eating properly. So how do you bring back that mealtime at home with families sitting around the table talking to your children versus having them on the mobiles doing this? So their purpose is that. Obviously pet care is probably the biggest purpose-led business that we have, just because the bond between pets and humans is huge, and people want to come to work for us because they love pets. And when the pandemic hit, we didn't have to say to people, oh, please would you come into work to run the factories to make money. They were coming into work to run the factories to make sure pets could eat. You just adore pets, so your responsibility is to come in and get those factories running so pets have food, because if they don't have that food, they won't survive. So it's a real higher order purpose. And then if you look at the confectionery business, much harder to drive that, because it's about treats. We always say, look, confectionery is a treat. Whenever people used to ask me what I did, and I said, oh, I work for M&M's, everybody's face lit up. Everybody, M&M's, really? That's what you do? And then you get people who will say, oh, well, you're making people fat. Well, no, we're not making people fat. What we're doing is providing a treat and we educate people to say, hey, this isn't breakfast, this isn't lunch, you should be having this every so often. It's a treat. We put the calories right on the front of pack, so that people can manage their diet. So it's a very different business, but we bring smiles to people around the world, because there's nothing nicer when you've had you've got a job, or you've passed an exam, or you've been to the toilet for the first time when you're just over a year and you don't use your diaper, to have a reward and a treat. So
I wondered where you were going there. I was like, what?
I know you have to make it relatable to your business, and you've got to be true. And I personally couldn't work for a business that I couldn't get there with I'm doing the right thing. That's just who I am. I think everybody's different, but I think most of your members, Alexander, are in business because they want to do good, as well as be in business. And one of the reasons they're in business is to do good. And what better company to work for? I would say the companies that your members, they're going to get the employees, because I've got 3 kids, 2 millennials and a Gen Z. They are not going to work for anybody that doesn't have purpose at the heart of their business. They just won't. They're different to how we are.
And I have yes, absolutely. I have I suppose one on the verge between millennial and Gen Z, and one absolutely Gen Z, and it's all about purpose.
Thank you so much for that. And I want to start taking questions from everyone who's been listening. And as always, if you have more questions, please let us know by typing them into the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. I want to start with Laura Hall's question, going back to what you two were discussing at the beginning of this conversation. She asks, what do you believe is the role of business in helping female employees balance family with career?
Honestly, it's critical. When we lose women, we lose them when they have children. If you're going to lose them, that's the time that you lose them. So if you want a female workforce, and we believe, the diverse workforce gives for better business, you have an obligation to help. Nikki and I both have been through it numerous times ourselves. It's hard, when you first have a baby. Everything's thrown up in the air. Your hormones are all over the place. Trying to balance all of that stuff is really, really difficult. And it's incumbent on businesses. If you want a diverse workforce, you have to make it easier, whether that be flexibility in work hours, because it's important. Because whether you're female or male, having children is a big deal. But it's especially harder for women. We know that they take more of the burden, and it's not just the burden. A lot of what happens is you can get certainly when I talk to women across the business, they get more criticism from friends and family for going back to work than they actually do from the workforce. So part of it is, we have women's groups, and we talk a lot about, what if the mother-in-law is looking down her nose at you because you've gone back to work? That's her problem. That's not your problem. Feel good about who you are. So I think there's an obligation to give flexible practices, but there's also an obligation to give women the opportunity to talk to other women who've been in that situation, because it's not easy. And if we try and pretend it is, it's not. You give up a lot. You give up a lot. What I always say to people, though, it's I don't know about you guys, but I don't remember being 2, 3, 4. Now I do remember being 11, 7, 15. So part of it also is making sure you're there at the right times, when the times are really important. And sometimes I think we focus on women when they've just had children. That's definitely the time when we most often lose them. But you've got to focus at the time when those children need you the most, which is probably when they're 13, 14, 15 and going through pretty difficult times, sometimes at school, and giving that flexibility then as well. So it's an across the board thing, but businesses have to do it.
And the only thing I'd mention is, we know that particularly for women in the workforce, is that if you have groups where you have women that can talk to each other, or training programs that are defined absolutely for women, and you can have those, you can talk about having those crucial. I'm a professionally qualified coach, and what some of the conversations I prepare women for the most are things like, how do I talk to my husband about how do we balance careers between my career and his career? How do I talk to my boss about the fact that he appears to be kind of thinking that I can't travel when actually I'd like to travel? And he's kind of, so these are the kind of conversations that the crucial conversations we have to help people have. because that's going to make the difference.
Thank you so much. The next question comes from Lynn McQuaker, who says that restoring coral reefs aligns with Mars' need for fish sustainability and seems like a terrific organic outreach choice for Mars. How do you involve all team members in this kind of outreach, and who leads those activations?
Yeah, I mean, it depends. Then it comes from all sources. On the whole, most of those sorts of activations come from our, we have a corporate affairs function that defines a lot of our purpose and our sustainability goals and where we want to go. So ideas, though, pretty much come from anywhere. Actually, the Coral Reefs one came from one of our owners, Frank Mars, who'd been personally investing in this area because it's a personal, passion of his for many, many years. And so we were like, oh, that's a good idea. How do we help with that? Because he just wasn't able to get enough traction on his own. But the ideas, I would say, come from everywhere. And then what we do is we talk about them. We put the programs in place, and then we invite associates to say, would you like to take part? And it's a big part of what we do. We, to engage associates. And we give people time off every year to go and work in the community. And some people will work in shelters. Some people will help build homes. Some people will build bikes in children's homes. So our associates across the world decide what programs they want to work in. So there's a lot of ground root stuff. But most importantly is to make the difference and let people choose. Everybody has different, interests and ideas. So for our Coral Reef program, the associates that want to get involved will find a way to help them get involved. And then we have, I can't remember how many people we send a year, Nikki, but we have that MAP program, ambassador program, where people
Mars ambassador program.
And they'll go to Africa for a week and help on the cocoa farms. And it's a tough program to get into, but people love the fact that they can go and do some of these things, and the company encourages it.
Yeah, and I actually had an associate that worked for me who went and worked on the coral reefs for 3 weeks in Indonesia. And so yes, you can apply, and then obviously it's a pretty competitive program to get into.
Yeah, I asked them, could I go out there, and they were like, no. I love scuba diving, but they were like, no, sorry, not you.
Well, I hope you'll get a chance on the next trip, Tracy.
I hope so. I think I'm going to have to do it on my own, though. I think there's lots of other people way more deserving that need to go before I do.
If you want to do that, let me know. I would love to join you on that. And we're coming up at the end of the time. I just want to say thank you so much, Tracy and Nikki, for this wide-ranging conversation. And in the last few seconds, are there any final points that you want to emphasize to the community before we wrap up?
I would just say, honestly, whatever you do, you can make a difference, particularly from a diversity point of view, whether it's your children, whether it's your friends, whether it's the people you work with, just everybody that makes a small change can make a massive, massive difference. Most women honestly just need a bit more encouragement and just need a little bit more confidence. And you can get that from your parents, from your husband, from your children. Take care of the women in your life and tell them how great they are and give them more confidence, and we will all benefit by having more women in the workplace.
And I would just add that I was fortunate enough to have a conversation with Peter Block, who is many years ago, and one thing he said was, you change the world one conversation at a time, one room at a time. So don't think that just because you always have a chance to have a different conversation than you've had before, and really think about that. Lean into the things that matter for you.
Well, again, Nikki and Tracy, thank you so much for sharing all of your wisdom with us today. I took a lot from this. I know that others have taken from this as well, and just want to thank you for everything you're doing to elevate humanity through business.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.